Hello, Sangha. Happy Sunday. Sangha Ocean Beach. I'm Brother Dave. I'm so happy you're here. Good to see you. You know I call you Sangha Ocean Beachers the happy SOBs. Well, thanks for being one of the happy SOBs. Whether you're here with us now on Sunday, live via Zoom, or watching a recording later on, you're a happy SOB according to me. And that's how I like to live, right? We have to surround ourselves with what we want. So welcome to session 2 of Practices for Lightness, our second and final session of kind of unpacking some classic teachings from the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh that we can apply to the world of chaos and madness that we all live in. And I can say that with so much confidence. I don't care where you are. You're in a world of chaos. Some of us more or less, different styles. And so to that end, let's begin as we do. Let's begin at the beginning by giving ourselves the time and the space and the permission to just arrive. Let's take our comfortable seat. So as soon as I know I'm headed into a period of dedicated meditation, in this case, the 5 minutes that we're going to sit together in a minute or two, as soon as I am of that mind, the meditation has begun. Let's not rush through this transition. First, I get in touch with my body, usually by moving around, listening, settling. I do not need to become some Buddha statue in order to be mindful. I need to bring my body as it feels today to a place where alertness and rest coexist. I want to be at my ease. This is why I soften my belly. This is why I find comfortable seat for my hands. I can invite the muscles in my face to relax, and my eyes may or may not float closed. Of course, we can adjust ourselves during this period, and when we do so, if we have a pain or an itch, we do it with our full attention. So for that period of time, when I move my foot from one place to another, that becomes the object of my concentration. The only rule is be gentle with yourself. This period of meditation will begin with one sound of the bell and will end with 2. It'll be approximately 5 minutes long. Enjoy your breathing. Breathing in, I am aware that I have a body. Breathing out, I smile in gratitude for my body and everything it makes possible for me. In, aware of body. Out, smiling. Breathing in, I'm aware that I am breathing in. Breathing out, I am aware that I am breathing out. In, out. Breathing in, I am aware of the whole presence of the Sangha here and everywhere, supporting my practice. Breathing out, I am nourished by the presence of the Sangha here and everywhere, supporting my practice. In, aware of Sangha. Out, nourished by Sangha. Breathing in, we have arrived. Breathing out, we are home. In, arrived. Out, home. Thank you, friends. Feel free to stretch out and unwind and massage yourselves. Scratch the itch. So today I'm excited to continue our deep dive into what I like to call practices for lightness. I feel like there are a lot of well-worn paths, a lot of easy routes to a feeling of heaviness right now. For good reason. It's not in our imaginations, I don't think. And so that calls to me to practice lightness. One of the nice things about being an old yogi as I am, yoga was sort of my gateway drug to these spiritual domains, is that yoga is very good at teaching a very simple understanding of balance. If my right leg is stronger than my left leg, well, balance is spending more time wobbling on my left leg. Movement so counterintuitively into discomfort usually is movement towards balance. And so heaviness, like a heavy blanket, can be a comfort. We can hide inside of it. We can use depression and despair and stories of hopelessness and powerlessness to insulate ourselves from the reality of how both painful and beautiful things are. And so lightness is standing on that other foot and leaning into our boundless capacity, not just as individuals, but as a collective, as a Sangha, as a family, all synonyms, to discover lightness. Because it's there, right? Everything is like that, light on one side and dark on the other. If there were no sadness, there would be no joy. The word joy would not make sense if somehow we redacted the word pain from our vocabulary. Like the two sides of the coin interdependently co-arise. They create each other. They need each other. So yes, I can write down a list right now of 100 things that really piss me off, make me sad, terrify me. I'm sure you could too. But that truth makes it so important that sometimes I sit down and write the list of things that bring me joy. That I train myself, habituate myself to savoring the things that are good. Because they're there. They're there. They're just not always as easy to see. This is not our fault. This is not even some extreme or hyperbolic emergency. This is just our biological programming. We know now that the brain and the nervous system are hardwired, right, to negativity bias, to seeing and constantly seeking the problem and trying to fix it. We know that we were biologically developed to find safety that way. But unchecked, right? Unchecked, then if we spend all our time standing on that very strong leg that we have hardwired, then my entire life becomes a long series of problems to solve. That doesn't sound very fun. That doesn't sound very free. There's no freedom in that. There's some freedom in a sip of strong decaf coffee. I'll tell you that. Maybe just for me. So last week, we looked at classic teaching from Thich Nhat Hanh, 3 words. Are you sure? And we talked at length about how the answer is always no. How the answer is always no. And one way to think about that practice is it's sort of like a crowbar. If you take it up, if you just get into the habit of asking yourself over and over again, are you sure about this right now, Dave? And then immediately respond to yourself, no, you are not. Right? You start to break open boxes, right? You start to knock down fake walls. You get a better look at what's really going on in the world inside of yourself before we start dealing with the world outside of ourselves, seemingly. One of the lenses that we can look at when we look at that world inside of ourselves is in classic Buddhism, being fully aware, of course, that neither I nor the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, when he was alive, care about whether or not there was a person called the Buddha, and whether or not you call yourself a Buddhist. As Thich Nhat Hanh liked to say, we don't need any more Buddhists. We need more practitioners. So even though my training and background allows me to rely on these classic teachings, don't mistake me. I'm not trying to recruit you to some club. But when we look at these classic teachings, one of the things we find, one sort of generalized understanding that we find, is called the 3 poisons. And the 3 poisons are greed, delusion, and ill will. And if I can train myself to use my crowbar, right, of a respectful and rational uncertainty, because that is the reality of my experience, I'm only pretending when I feel certain, because I know that I'm looking at reality through a cocktail straw. I can only see a very tiny bit. I can only know the background of a very tiny bit of what's actually taking place. So when I start using that crowbar and creating more space inside of myself, busting up all of the little compartments and containers that I've put myself in, that society has put me in, that my social programming and my upbringing and my education and my language and my culture of origin, and on, right? These are all containers, like a Russian nesting doll. When I start breaking those up, I get a really different look, a much more expansive look at the 3 poisons, at the greed, ill will, and delusion inside of myself. And I can start to work with them, right? If I want there to be peace in the world, then don't I have to be peace? Isn't it unreasonable of me to fervently desire world peace and yet to stand at a rally with peace written on a sign as I shout in anger? As I threaten and insult? Peace in oneself, peace in the world, said Thich Nhat Hanh. And so first, right, we have to look at all of these things that we see in the world and acknowledge, not in a punishing or self-attacking way, but just acknowledge that they are not really outside of ourselves, as they may appear on screens and in print. They're in us. They're in us. So how can we get out of this? Right? How can we very practically address the three poisons inside of ourselves so that we can start being peace in the world. Let's take them one at a time. So let's start with ill will. You're talking, you're listening to a former sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. I know a little bit about ill will. I'm a trained part of the military industrial complex. I'm a stormtrooper here on the Death Star. And when I look back on it, right, I'm 50 now. When I look back at like 19-year-old Dave, and I question, like, why was he willing and even excited to do that, right? To spend years and years of his life to get really, really good at killing. Let's call it what it is, right? Call it what it is. It's professional murder. I'm like, why was I so stoked to do that? And I see it as two reasons, right? And they both come back to ill will. The first was that I really had a lot of ill will towards myself. Life was pretty hard for 19-year-old me. I grew up poor, the child of immigrants in the Bronx in the 70s and 80s. Things were tough and uncertain and dangerous and violent. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not there. I'm on the sunny shores of San Diego right now with a smile on my face and a hot cup of coffee. That's about as far away as I could get from the Bronx as I could. Not that I don't still love it, but it's wild. And so that's the first thing, right? Is that I was in this difficult and unpleasant and unbeneficial situation in many ways. And a lot of what I was doing was blaming myself for it. And so I had a lot of ill will directed inwardly. And, the military is very good at manipulating that and capitalizing on that in our disenfranchised youth, right? And saying like, oh, okay. You look in the mirror and you see a pimply-faced failure. Like, don't you want to be a shining, sword-carrying, pressed uniform-wearing success? Like, that's the sales pitch. And I bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. Oh, that's exactly what I wanted. Was to become something or someone completely different. Right? But why? Right? Ill will, self-directed ill will. And then when I look at my externally directed ill will, oh my God, I was raised, to be 5 different kinds of racist and sexist and classist. Holy cow, I had just believed most of the propaganda that we, for those of us that are Americans on the call, for sure, that we're just being taught in school. Like, oh, these people are bad and these people are good. I was at a park today with Rob. Good to see you, Bridget and Rob. I was at a Cabrillo National Monument, a place where a Spanish conquistador landed here in Southern California in the 1500s. We got to watch a whole 20+ minute documentary about his landing and conquest of that area that never spoke to racism or colonialism. It's ridiculous. It was offensive. Let's say that. It was offensive. And yet, I was sitting there with Rob laughing, because I was like, this is exactly what I was taught in school. That there was some brave nobility to the ruthless colonization. So, right, very easy if your society has spent your entire youth, right, programming you to hate and fear the other, to have externalized ill will. And so we need to start there and just acknowledging it, right? Acknowledging it. Like, there's a part of me that's sexist. There's a part of me that's racist. There's a part of me that's classist. There's a part of me that's nationalistic and xenophobic. I remember the Zen nun, Sherry Huber, one of my core teachers. And she said, it was a huge moment in my practice when I realized that I was prejudiced against prejudiced people. Right? Because she thought she had, dealt with ill will, with that poison, and then she realized, like, oh no, I've just transferred my ill will. Now I hate the oppressor. You see? The opposite of that is a woman in my Roots Sangha in Brooklyn, 20 years ago, when I very first started studying with Thich Nhat Hanh. And we had our sharing, as we will here in a little bit. And she bowed in and told the story of her drive to the Sangha that day. Now, this is in New York City in Brooklyn, so hectic, traffic-filled, kind of aggressive driving environment. Very unpleasant. Worse than LA for you West Coasters, if you can imagine. And she said, as she's talking to this assembly of her Sangha, she says, yeah, I was driving here on the freeway and somebody was merging in. She said, and I wasn't a jerk, right? I didn't speed up or do anything negative, like to get in their way. She said, but I wasn't very nice either. Like, I didn't slow down or change lanes or anything I could have done to make their merge easier and lighter and safer. And she said, as they were merging, I looked over at them, and because I was coming here, I imagined how I would feel if when I looked through that driver's window, I saw one of you. I saw one of my beloved Sangha. And she was a regular practitioner. She was there every Sunday. And she said, my God, I love you all so much. If I had seen it was one of you, I would have changed lanes. I would have slowed down. I would have done everything I could to make that experience easier and safer for you. And she said, and then the very next thought I had was, who is not in my Sangha? Who is not in my Sangha? And so part of why we practice this way and we gather like this and learn to love each other in our sharing and in our collective practice is so that we can break down some of those barriers, some of those stories that we can only love our blood families or our very old friends or people who live right in our neighborhood. Because that's just not true. That's just not true. Everybody is in our human family. The trials and triumphs of everyone on the planet affect me personally. Sometimes it's easier to see and sometimes it's harder, but I know it's always true. So that's step one. That's step one, right? Is acknowledging and embracing and working directly with our own ill will, internally and externally directed. Who is not in my Sangha has helped me a lot. I've been sitting with that one for almost 20 years. Then the next one I want to talk about is greed. Oh man, obviously, right? Our world has been kind of turned upside down by greed. No matter what your politics are, no matter what your economics are, I don't think you will argue with me that we are suffering right now from a crisis of greed. And it's affecting everyone. It's affecting everyone. Only increasingly so, as I have observed in the last 50 years. And so what's the antidote to greed? Is generosity and service. I remember reading the writings of the amazing Sharon Salzberg, one of the founders of the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts, a along with Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield, she started traveling as a very young woman to Burma and Thailand and all these Asian Buddhist locales, training in mindfulness and bringing the teachings back here to the United States. She's one of the American founders of the movement of mindfulness here in our country, and an incredible teacher. And she loves to tell a story about how when she very began, she went to some center, probably in Burma, and she was there for like a week or two, and she went to the master, and she said like, hey, you know, I've been here a while. I was kind of hoping to get some education, you know, some classes on how to meditate, you know. And he looked at her and kind of shook his head, and he was like, you know, this is what people from the West always want. It's like, you want an instruction manual. He said, you're skipping a step, like you're not even ready to practice internal mindfulness, to sit on a cushion in silence until you understand generosity. Right? Because you're going to need so much generosity to not attack or even hate yourself when you get to know yourself really in the quiet of mindfulness practice. And so he sent her to the nearby village and gave her the instruction that she needed to serve. And so she fed the poor and helped the destitute, you know, to prepare the ground in her body-mind for the brutality, in some senses, of getting a real clear look at who we are, that mindfulness can do. So however you can do it, find a way to be generous. Find a way to give. And like, not financially necessarily, although that's fine too. But I'm talking about more than that. I'm talking about give till it hurts a little bit. Inconvenience yourself. Give your time, right, when it's not easy. There's so much learning in it. Generosity may be the deepest book. And then delusion, sometimes ignorance is translated as. There's kind of two ways out of delusion. One is to just recognize that nobody's in charge and nobody knows what's really going on. Because that's one of the biggest delusions, right? We very naturally, based on how we were raised and how we were programmed and how we were educated, how our language even is structured, right? Because I can only think in my language. And I think really differently in English than I do in Spanish, for example. So there's a lot of factors there. But however my story got formed, it has a lot of craving for order, right? We're terrified of the unknown. We're terrified of chaos. And so we like to tell a very neat story, you know, that ends with the prince and the princess riding off into the sunset. But that's not real. You know, that's not real. Like, the most cursory examinations of history show that everything is chaos. Nobody's really in charge, and like a tiny little thing over here can cause a war over here. That's not easy to hold. That's not easy to hold. And then, of course, as we talked a lot about last week, what here in the United States in particular, what we call news, I put it in air quotes, is really like a, highly marketed propaganda, that I have less than 10% of confidence in, right? Less than 10% of confidence in. And so that doesn't make it easy either, right? Because this propaganda, this manipulative story is, in part designed to keep me in line, in part designed to keep me moving forward with the status quo and behaving, in part designed to sell things to me and keep me buying things, right? But did you hear anything in there about the truth? It's not there. It's not there. And so it's very difficult to take a step back, right? Even a little one from all of that, and to face, as the amazing nun Pema Chodron likes to say, the groundlessness. The groundlessness. Just like it's difficult to wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and be like, I might die today. That's not easy. I do that every day. I dump that bucket of cold water on my head every day, but it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. And so that's one way to get out of delusion, is just to take a step back from the idea of certainty at all. And then a second way is to get really good about what you do put into your mind, how you do feed your ignorance. To use ignorance in the most neutral way, like lack of knowledge. For me, for example, I see over the years that I spend a lot more time reading books and a lot less time scrolling on the supercomputer that I carry in my hand. I've noticed that the supercomputer, very suspect, right? Very toxic, poorly sourced. Whereas the books I read, and I have a few here that we're going to talk about at the end that I recommend. Man, you can really learn something from a good book written by the right person. And you're not getting that propagandist marketing punch in the face, with your morning coffee. So I could go on, but I really want to leave some time in our hour together for questions and answers. And so let me just say one last thing. It's easy for me in words to say that what we need to do is to get really in touch with ourselves and develop the resilience and the strength to be uncertain, to stand amongst groundlessness and chaos, and to keep an open mind, and to be quick to change our minds, and all the things that I'm implying or directly saying. It's really easy for me to say that, but I want to acknowledge how hard, how brutally hard it can be to actually practice it. I don't want to pretend that what I'm saying is easy at all. And so I'll leave you with a teaching from an incredible steward for the environment and for the world of mindfulness, an eco-psychologist and eco-activist named Joanna Macy, who's also a Dharmacharya, a Dharma teacher in the tradition of the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, an ordained student of Thich Nhat Hanh. Joanna Macy, if you haven't read any of her books, it really doesn't matter. Just go find one and read it. Yeah, she'll blow your doors off. She'll blow your doors off. And I remember going to Jack Kornfield's Mindfulness Center in Northern California. It's called Spirit Rock, to help host a retreat. And the manager of Spirit Rock at that time knew that I was a Thich Nhat Hanh guy, and that Joanna Macy was also his student. And so she came over to me as we were setting up. And she was like, "Brother Dave, did you know that Joanna Macy was just here?" And I was like, "What?" And I put down the box I had in my hand. And I was like, "Really?" And she said, "Yes, she was here for days. Would you like a nugget? Would you like some of the teaching right now?" And I just grounded myself in my body and looked her in the eye and said, "Yes, please." And this is the gift she gave me, and I'll pass it on to you. She said, at the end of her 3 days with us, Joanna looked at the room, and she was talking exactly about what we're talking about being peace and also practicing peace activism. And Joanna said, "Maybe you really want to help, but you don't know how, and you don't know what to do. It's so confusing." She said, "That's totally okay. That's totally normal. Here's what you do. Just look around and find somebody that looks like they know what they're doing. And it seems to be doing something good. And she said, just help them. Just help them. And then you're moving forward, right? And then maybe along the way, you'll find some different path that'd be more your own. But she was very clear. She said, now, the time, and this was maybe 10 years ago, she said, the time for individual heroes is behind us. We have too many problems for that now. We need to link arms and move together as a collective, as a Sangha, as a family, synonyms. And so I'll leave you with that. I think at the essence, if we look at the entire 80 years from 16 to 96, something like that Thich Nhat Hanh was on the planet teaching, what thread connects them all? The entire time he was practicing with and building Sangha. The entire time he was focused on community and community building. I think this is at the base, the deepest answer we can find. Alone, oh my God, I'm 99.6% chimpanzee, biologically. Like, alone, I'm a mess. But together, my God, together we can do some stuff. We can help. We can heal. Thank you all so much for listening. Before I open it up for questions, just before I forget, I want to recommend 3 books to you. This is not for everybody, right? Some of you prefer to learn via video. Go to the Plum Village YouTube channel and watch a whole bunch of talks by Thich Nhat Hanh. These are all teachings from Thich Nhat Hanh. But if you're a book person, I want to recommend 3 books real quick. The first is Interbeing. And Interbeing is Thich Nhat Hanh's breakdown of the 14 trainings with which he framed his personal school of mindfulness, which he calls Thiep Hien in Vietnamese, which I'm mispronouncing. Vietnamese is a tonal language, and I don't speak it. But that means order of interbeing, right? Order of interbeing. And so if you go through these 14 trainings, they're being offered by Thai, as we call Thich Nhat Hanh, as a global ethic, as a universal way of looking at all this stuff that we've been talking about that can be used by Christians, Muslims, Sufis, Jews. He doesn't care. This is a great place to start if you haven't gone down this road. And it's a tiny one. Number 2, if you want to go like very directly into Thich Nhat Hanh speaking specifically about community and about international togetherness, this book, Good Citizens, breaks down the teaching of the 4 Noble Truths through that lens, through the lens of social action. Also, a short one. Last but not least, this fatty is Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. This is a progressive activist historian, right, writing something that he offers as an alternative to the propagandized, whitewashed, racist education that most of us have been given. It goes from Columbus to the Clinton years. I'm still reading it myself. I haven't even finished it. I go through it section by section, like when I want to learn a little bit more. That's how I'm doing it. I'm kind of taking it in bite-sized pieces because it's big. But if you're ready to like take the red pill, take a step back from, delusions like thinking there's a difference between Republicans and Democrats in the United States, for example, that's a great place to start. Now I'd like to, with the 15 minutes that we have left, open up the floor to any questions or comments that you may have. Our guidelines are very simple. Please address me directly or the group directly. We don't engage in any crosstalk amongst ourselves in the Sangha. We don't answer each other's questions or offer any advice. We let the facilitator do that, and only if they're asked a direct question. Because you can just share about how you're feeling right now, and not ask a question, and we're just going to move on to the next person so that your share is really safe. And unless you ask me for a response, that when your share is over, it's over. You've just given it yourself and us it as a gift. We also practice true confidentiality, and that means we don't share outside of the Sangha with these sharings. Now, of course, the exception to that is that we're recording this and going to put it publicly on YouTube because we're doing a course that we want to share with a bunch of people. So if you end up asking a question or sharing something, and in hindsight, you're like, ooh, that got kind of personal, just email me and I'll redact it from the recording. So don't worry about that. And so with that, please raise your hand either like this if you're on camera, or use the raise hand icon if you're off camera and would like to share or ask a question via audio only. The floor is open. Well, we have a hand. I'm inviting you to unmute. It's nice to start your share or question with your name and where you're joining us from.
Dearest Ty, dear Sangha, it's Tracy from Kentucky. I just want to say, I love Sangha. I love you guys. And Sangha has saved my life. It saved me from myself. It's helped me learn how to love myself better by being vulnerable and allowing you guys to love me back, which is real scary for me. And being a loner my whole life, it's turned it around. But I love what we're doing. We're leading our actions with love and bringing peace to the world. And we're all in this together. We're all doing the same thing. And it's just awesome. It's like the love gang. Like, I don't know, it's just great. But I just wanted to say that I love you guys. Down and out.
Thank you, Tracy. We have another hand. I'm inviting you to unmute.
Dear Sangha, so I'm Andy Katz. I practice in Annapolis, Maryland, East Coast. Sort of forum shopping. I've never been with you guys before. However, a dear Sangha brother of mine, Tim McCormick, turned me on to you. Tim, unfortunately, has passed away suddenly 2 weeks ago, and it really has struck me very hard. I'm dealing with it. Yeah, heart attack. They couldn't revive him. And we have a morning Sangha where we were meeting on Zoom 3 mornings a week. And I just feel this huge hole in my life. And I thought I'd give you guys a try. And, I like what I hear. I'm a Plum Village guy. I took transmission from Thai at Deer Park in 2011. And I was an OI aspirant and gave it up because I found other things to do to give back. And I just wanted to say that there is a way to avoid suffering through the transformation of our consciousness by understanding how our mind works. And Thai picked up when this school that kind of died out, Yogacara, and wrote a book called Understanding Our Mind. And I really highly recommend that. I was studying with a former monk over the winter, Brother Phap Phu, and we did a deep dive into Vasubandhu's 30 verses. And I would direct people who want to go into a little bit more about how we're wired, but ultimately understanding the benefit of non-dualism. And once you get rid of the dualistic track of thinking, there's a lot of relief there. But I just feel good being back in the bosom of a Sangha with soul. And I'm picking up on that vibe with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and thanks for letting us know about Tim McCormick. He's an old dear friend, and I did not know that. Thank you very much. The floor is open. We have a hand. I'm inviting you to unmute.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zachary. I'm from Texas, and I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the format here, the online availability of this, and I know we talk about the supercomputers in our pocket, but it's pretty nice to be able to to have a sangha and have folks to practice with, especially when the nearest anything mindfulness related is 6.5 hours away. So uh, glad to be here, and I look forward to spending more time with all of you. And now out.
Thanks, Zachary. We have time for at least one more share and or question. We have some hands. I'm inviting you to unmute.
Hi dear Sangha, Bernie and Mike here in San Diego, and I just have to give a shout out to our new Sangha member from Annapolis, Maryland. I grew up in Glen Burnie, Maryland, and waited tables in Annapolis, Maryland, the year after I graduated high school. So it's just beautiful to hear that Maryland accent coming through. And this is a beautiful Sangha, and I'm glad we haven't been here in a little while. But I just, I love thinking about Thai and, the Dalai Lama and Martin Luther King really grounding down into the conditions that they taught. Because, it's so easy, to historically lose that, right? But to think about the work of growing up in a war-torn country or watching people get beat and bit by dogs and, all of the things that made these incredible bodhisattvas, they stayed with the message of peace, despite, our human nature in that those conditions to, lose that faith in something bigger, and that bigger inner connection of love that they knew. And I try to meditate on that and think deeply in these times when we're all hearing things, and I'm hearing things, that kind of spark that othering and that division in me, to think there are people that have done this, and Joanna Macy, she's a person who has done that. She has stayed grounded in love, and all of it, connecting it together. I appreciate the story about the woman who went to Burma and saying oh, as Westerners we have this idea that it's things are separate and packaged, and so just trying to show up in love every day with the people that, spark that little thing inside of us for whatever reason, and examining it and going deep in. And it's just such a beautiful practice. And I hear you, Brother Dave, say how hard it is, but oh my gosh, I wouldn't have it any other way, and I wouldn't be able to do it without this Sangha and people reminding me of this all the time. So thank you so much. Going out.
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you, Mike. Kathy, are you trying to raise hand? I see you. No? Okay. Just playing with the tech. I understand. I can't hear you. Are you? Give me a thumbs up, Kathy, if you're looking to raise hand. Yeah? Okay, I'm inviting you to unmute. Takes a village. Try there. There we go.
Okay. You know what? Dear Sangha, this is Kathy from Ohio. Yeah, on the screen, I don't know if you could see it, Dave, but Bernie and Mike went away, and it looked like somebody else was raising their hand, and I was trying to alert you to that. But since I'm here, I too just want to express my appreciation for our Sangha, the availability of online meetings and having a community. I love you all dearly, and it does keep me it keeps me mindful. You know, I think in a way, knowing that I have this community, and on Sundays I'm going to reconnect. And it helps. It does help me keep me mindful. Thinking of that, thinking of, you know, what did I learn last Sunday, or what did I hear last Sunday, or what am I going to think about next Sunday? You know. So anyway, thank you. Bowing out.
Thank you, Kathy. And thank all of you. That's the time we have today for sharing and listening. And thank you for your presence and your practice here. I have a couple of announcements, but before I do that, I wanted to ask you, Andy, and I'm inviting you to unmute so you can respond. I had the thought that maybe we could invite Belle to send some loving energy to the continuation of our brother in the practice, Tim McCormick, whose passing you just shared. Does that sound okay? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's our tradition in the Plum Village School, in the mindfulness order of the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, when we hear about someone's passing, to just take a moment and breathe with the sound of a bell. And in that moment of presence, we're invited to just send love to them. Even if we're hearing their name today for the very first time. Tim McCormick was a dear old friend of mine in the practice, and one of my first teachers to help me see through. It's very fitting that we're talking about him today inside of this topic, because he really helped me see through some of the prejudices and small thinking that I was still carrying when I met him 15, 20 years ago. So let's just find our comfortable seat, and with a smile on your face, if you'd like, send love to the continuation of our brother. Listen. 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 This beautiful sound brings us back to our true home. Thank you, friends. And look at that, 6 o'clock. Wow, we did it. I'll end by throwing the link that you've all seen already, where the course lives on my website, Practices for Lightness. The course is by donation, but your presence and your practice here or via recording is already such a generous donation. We do it together. We do it together. I'm going to leave these videos up on my website as a resource and add some of the book recommendations and some videos and just kind of create a resource page there. So keep coming back and checking out that page if this topic is close to your heart. And if you know other people that are struggling with this right now, whether they're addicted to looking at the news all day or whether they never look at it and they feel really guilty or somewhere in between, I'll send this to them. This is for all of them. This is for all of them. Thank you, Sangha.